look what we have right here. This is, of course, the brand spanking new 2024 Alfa Romeo Tonale, and this is the Veloce trim level, which is the top trim level. And you also have this verde green color, which looks absolutely stunning in the sunshine. A $2,000 option to have this color on here. But I think that's definitely something that I would pick personally for this car because it just looks so good and sets it apart a little bit. A splash of color out on the roads with all the white, black, and gray cars that we have today. So what we're going to do in this video is have a look at some of the spec and tech of the new Veloce, and also talk about this gorgeous design from a front, side, rear, and the interior. And then we're going to take this for a drive. I really like the way this drives. It is a plug-in hybrid, so if you want to, you can have this in fully EV mode, but I think that only benefits the drive. So we have a 1.3 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder under the hood, 285 horsepower, and it does 0 to 60 in 5.7 seconds, which is not bad for this type of package. I think it's a pretty decent power output in this car. And as I said, you also have electric motors, one in the front, one in the back. So when you have it in full electric, it actually only drives the rear wheels on this car. And by the way, have a look at this Alfa Romeo wheels that we have right here, looking absolutely fantastic. Fuel economy comes in at about 29 combined, and the price for this, as this one is spec'd with the Veloce trim, is about $58,000, but the base price is around $47,000. This has a few options: the wheels, the sunroof, and the paint, for example. Now let's talk about this front end design. Such a stunning looking machine. I think this is such a better looking car than its sibling, the Dodge Hornet. I think this just comes together way better with the grille in the middle that kind of cuts through the overall height that we have on this car. So this, of course, you don't have this piece in the Dodge Hornet, and I think when that's lacking, the front end just becomes too high. And the way you can see that this is a Veloce, without, of course, looking at the badge right there on the side, is that the grille itself and the lower parts of the grille right here, they're all blacked out. So in the TI and the lesser specs, or the more basic specs, these are in silver. That's definitely one of the reasons alone that I would go for the Veloce. It just looks so much better when it's blacked out. And have a look at this hood in this sunshine, just how beautifully sculpted it is. This is typical Italian proportions to me, when you have these big volumes, soft curvatures, in combination with just a couple of key sharp lines, just like this one right here going up to the A-pillar. And one detail I love about this hood is it feels like the designers thought about the logo when they actually designed the hood, because we have this piece right here kind of housing the beautiful logo in the front end. So the surfacing of a major key component of the bodywork now has a connection to a major component in the graphics in the front end. You have the front mounted camera right here, as you can see, and everything here is open. This entire grille is completely open, as you can see. We have open slots up here. We have these gorgeous 3 LED light bars that also, right now are the indicators, with the main 3 big headlights behind it, looking pretty aggressive because we have this single line right here cutting in where the hood ends and the rest of the front end starts. I think it's a beautiful design with this nice chamfer going down here, housing the traditional grille of Alfa Romeo. Overall, the front end of this, there's no mistaking this for anything else than, of course, an Alfa Romeo, and even the side vents right here are functional. So you have side slots right here where the air can flow. Now, coming around to the side view, the first thing you notice here, at least in my opinion, is you can clearly just tell that this is an Alfa just by looking at the wheel design. So these are optional 20-inch wheels. This one comes standard with a 19-inch. But just looking at the wheel design here, I would definitely 100% go with this option to have these 20-inch wheels, because the circular design that we have right here, this is typical Alfa Romeo, and it just complements everything else about this car. You also have the Brembo brakes behind it with the Alfa Romeo logo right here, or font, instead of the Brembo, but they're still red, so you can see how that contrasts really well with the Verde color that we have on the exterior. And then of course you do have the blacked out Veloce badge right here on the side to show off what trim level it is you're driving. We do have one single piece on this car that is actually chrome, and that is in the rear end. We're gonna have a look at that in just a second. Then you also have these blacked out side mirrors, and have a look at this detail here. You do have the Italian flag right behind the glass in the same line that we have the indicator in, and you also have the camera for the 360 view mounted right here with the black trim, also of course going around the window. Now one little detail here that I don't know if I like it or not, but they took the snake, as you can see, from the Alfa logo, and instead of having the snake's head up there, they now have, you know, just an electric connection instead of the head. A little bit of a, you know, weird thing to put on here. I would rather have the normal logo up there, if anything, but it is a plug-in hybrid, so I think they wanted to show that off. But looking at the side view and the proportions of this thing, when the concept first came out, and I thought that the concept also looked pretty much production ready. So I thought to myself, I hope they're not gonna mess it up putting this into production. And the thing is, this looks almost identical to the concept. Have a look at that sharp line that goes right from the starting point, not the corner of the headlight, but it starts right here. And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about Italian design. You have this very sharp line right here. It almost sticks outwards from the bodywork a little bit to add some sharpness to it. Not Audi S5 or A5 sharpness in this. It's a little bit more subtle than that. Straight line, and then it just dips down slowly into the rear end graphics, looking absolutely beautiful. Then you also have a key line at the lower section. What I like here that they did with the graphic design to play around with that is to add some sort of black graphics in the lower sections and around the wheel arches to add some of that SUV feel to this design. But what it also does is it cuts out some of the volume that we have down here at the bottom and pretty much makes it look like a little bit more sleeker design. And I also like the design of this side skirt right here. But let's have a look at these wheels a little bit more and the design of these. So these are wheels that I would definitely never switch out, because as I said, they're just part of Alfa's DNA to have this type of wheels, and I think they look absolutely stunning. Another detail of the side view is that we have this upswing. So we have a combination of some sharp lines right here, for example, with these more organic feeling of the greenhouse design. Details like that, that for me makes it into an Italian car. And then you have the plug-in right here. You can just use a level 1 or a level 2. I had it charging overnight from 0, and you can get up to, I think I got 31 miles of range on a single charge, and it took me on a level 1 charger, keep that in mind, it took me about 8.5, 9 hours to do that. Now coming around to the rear end here, and this is where you can definitely see that this looks almost identical to the Dodge Hornet. However, we do have some different designs in the taillight graphics. I do prefer these taillights because it has this depth to it. So you have 3 LEDs going further and further in this LED. You also have the same type of, 3 LEDs here that you have in the front end, in combination with the trend of the decade, of course, which is this light bar in the middle. But I don't mind it. I think it looks good because it connects to the logo right there in the center, kind of breaking it up a little bit. But one thing I do want to change, there are a couple of things. You have the Tonale right here. I want to have this be in black. I don't understand why this is in silver when the Veloce badge on the side is black and pretty much everything else is black. Then we also have on the Veloce specifically, only on the Veloce, you have the dual exhaust pipes down there at the bottom. And that is also another reason why I would definitely go for the Veloce, because we have everything blacked out in the front end, and we also have visible dual exhaust in the rear, looking fantastic. Now one detail that I might want to change is to just remove this wiper in the back, because it's such a clean design overall, and that it doesn't really ruin it for me. But imagine if we just hid this, for example, up here and just cleaned everything up even more. I think that would look cleaner than what it is right here, even though this is a very clean and elegant looking design. Now we have this section down here. You see the diffuser. I'm not so sure where it sticks up in this black piece. I kind of want to have this be completely green, so we have a proper looking bumper just going across the entire rear end at the bottom section. Maybe move this down a little further, but we also have the reverse camera situated right here, as you can see. And let's open this up. Let me show you the space that you get in the trunk of the brand new 2024 Tonale. So this is actually bigger than the Stelvio, which is kind of weird because the Stelvio is overall in dimensions a bigger car, but you do have more trunk space in the back of the Tonale for some reason. You do have a 12-volt cigarette outlet here, a couple of lights, and this ski pad or ski door, which you can put your skis through. You just fold down the center armrest in the back seat, and you can figure that out. And you can also fold down the seats normally if you want to do that. And this is of course also power assisted. Overall, I think Alfa Romeo did an absolutely fantastic job with this design. It's not easy, you know, designing a small subcompact sedan SUV like this, because you don't have the lines to stretch out as much as you have on the sedans, for example, and the sports coupes. But I do think they did a fantastic job with these proportions, and specifically comparing it to the Dodge Hornet, the front end just does it for me a lot more here in this variant than it does in the Dodge Hornet. So let's just quickly have a look under the hood. Let me show you the 1.3 liter. It's a tiny little engine, but as I said, it's pretty powerful, 285 horsepower, even though the Dodge Hornet is actually more powerful. That's one detail that I don't really understand why they did it that way, but the Hornet has about 3 horsepower more, and this has around 250 something, 53 pound-feet of torque. The Hornet has around 280 pound-feet of torque. Not sure why the Dodge Hornet is the more powerful. It would make sense to have the exact same powertrain in both, but they decided to not go that route. So this is what it looks like. Tiny little 3-cylinder in here, or 4-cylinder, 1.3 liter. Alfa Romeo in the cover right here. Pretty basic stuff, nice and clean without too much plastic to cover everything up. So we had a look at the exterior. However, the exterior looks absolutely fantastic, as we just talked about, but the interior is by far one of the best interiors I have seen personally in a 2024 model, and I'm going to show you exactly why I think that. It is a pretty dark interior, as you can see. There's not a lot of contrast coloring. Would like to see this green that we have out here. Would like to see some sort of contrast or color like this, for example, stitched here in the door panel or something like that. Door panel looks pretty basic, also very dark, but I do like the dark. It gives this cozy feel. You have the memory seat settings here. The only silver piece is door handle and the speakers, and then of course you have the regular window controls here and the mirror controls with some storage at the bottom. You have an Alfa Romeo badge right there in the middle, an overlook of the interior, what it looks like. 12.3-inch gauge cluster, which is absolutely fantastic. As I said, one of the best in the business right now, and let me show you why in just a second. We also have a 10.2-inch infotainment screen. Now this thing right here, I do think kind of that this could have been implemented a little better than what we have right here, because as you can see, doesn't really have a connection to anything around it, but it's fine because the system itself is very, very good. You have vehicle, let's go in here for example, you have all the safety settings here which you can change up. You have the display settings, whatever you want to change here. You have my car, let's go in and see what this is. Driver mode, Explorer. Here you can see exactly what each drive mode that you select down here. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute as well. You can see what it does and what type of drive mode you are in. Then you have the comfort, you have the heated and cooled seats, which is also an option in this car. So you have the heat settings here for the seat, cooled ventilated seats down here, and you also have a heated steering wheel on and off. Very easy to use. The thing is, you might want to go in here and change the settings for the climate control settings and stuff like that. But the good news here is that, as you can see, we do still have physical buttons. Thankfully, thank you Dodge or Alfa Romeo, whoever came up with this first, to implement physical buttons in your new Hornet and the Tonale. It just looks fantastic, and it feels almost rubberized. It has this nice quality feel to it, and so does these vents. Very nice resistance to it, and as you can see, super easy to use, nothing complicated at all. It doesn't have to be complicated just because we're adjusting the vent is such an easy thing to do, so don't make it too complicated. And the thing is, everything in here has a nice feel to it. I'm not sure if you can hear this, but it just feels, resistance and nice clicks. And you have soft touch materials up top here. You have ambient lighting with this silver, right behind this silver trim piece that we have up here. Beautiful interior in my opinion, and it does feel almost old school with the layout of the stuff that we have in here. So have a look at this gauge cluster, and I'm going to let you know the reasons why I think this is one of the best clusters for 2024 that I've seen so far. First of all, look at this. We have some passion from the interior designers to create something nice and unique for this car that has a resemblance to the rest of the car with these circles housing for it. We have dual housing, soft touch material up top, and then we have this plastic on the inside. And this is, as I said, 12.3 inches, fully digital gauge cluster. And the thing about this is you can customize it however you want. Right now I have the map in the middle, but if we click this button here, for example, and then we can start to toggle around and get whatever information we want in the center. I like to have it on the map because we already have, as you can see, the speedometer up here. So that's already visible, and you have a second speedometer over here. So I don't need to have it in the center. I like to have it in the maps. And if you want to change the right side, you just go here with the right, the tachometer, the inside of the tachometer. You can just change that to have whatever you want as well. I honestly like to just keep it empty like this, so you have just the needle for the tachometer visible like that. I don't need any other of the information that's available to you, even though it is a very cool thing to have. And further down here at the bottom, you can see the range, electric range that you have left. Right now I just have 10 miles, and here's the gas level or the fuel gauge right here on this side. So we have two different kind of gauges for the levels of the power supply. One is electric, the other one is for the gas tank, which is pretty easy to figure out how that works. Moving further down here, you can see we have a massive, absolutely huge charging pad with a nice angle to it, so it's not going to slide anywhere. It also has this textured rubber feel to it. And you have a 12 volt here, two USBs, one USB regular and one USB-C as well. And this is the cool, drive mode selector here. So right now I'm in N. Let's put it to A, which is 100% electric. You can see that the tachometer now goes into this EV mode and shows you power and charge instead of revs, which I think is really cool. And if we go into N, which is sort of a mix between EV and internal combustion. So the gas pedal has this click to it. If you press the gas pedal all the way down to the bottom, it's going to engage the internal combustion engine and give you more power, which is, I think, is a very cool system to have, this plug-in hybrid. I thought it was going to be very jerky and jumpy to drive this car because it switches on and off the internal combustion engine, but it's actually very, very smooth. However, if you want to go in full sport mode, use these massive metal pedals here. You just put it into D, and I don't know if you can hear that, but it fires up the engine immediately, and the speedometer and the gauge cluster here gets a lot more sporty with the red outline here. You can see the red line. And in this mode, the internal combustion engine always stays on, and it also revs a lot higher when you have it in this mode. Sounds pretty good for a 1.3 liter four-cylinder too, honestly. In the middle here, you do have the dampers. So if you want to, you can just press this, and you have soft dampers. Now it's off. Now you have the stiff dampers, which we want to have kind of, we have in a sport mode. If you want to turn off the traction control, you just hold this to the right, and you can see that the traction control is now off. You can see that ESC off, but let's turn that back on for now. Further back, you do have this pretty standard looking gear selector, and this is a 6-speed, which in my opinion feels pretty weird to have a 6-speed automatic transmission in a 2024 model. I would much rather have an 8-speed that is a little bit quicker shifting than this. And here you can see the 360 view with the trajectory lines, pretty clear and high resolution for the backup camera. Let's put that back into park, and let's put this back into N so we quiet this down a little bit while we make this review. Further back, you do have these settings for the parking assists, and then you have this e-save button here. So if you click this, if you're driving along and you're maybe you have it in N or something like that, or D or N specifically, and you want to save your electric range, that you have down there for something special. I don't know what that could be. Maybe you're leaving early in the morning, you don't want to wake everybody up. Then you can click this e-save button, and it's going to save the electric range until you want it. So then you just turn that e-save off and it will apply the electric range. So it's a pretty smart system, this thing. Further to the right of the gear selector, you have this volume control. And again, this toggle right here, or this dial, it just feels high quality. It feels like it's metal, and it has a nice click and resistance to it. You have the parking brake right here, also feels pretty nice. Not as high quality as the rest of the buttons up here, I would say. Further back, you do have two cup holders, and have a look at this key. How beautifully designed this key. It's pretty big for a normal Alfa Romeo entry-level Alfa, but you do have the Alfa down here. You have the normal buttons, as you can see, but looking at the rear end, we do have some key lines. Look at this, some key lines in the button itself, and you also have the Alfa Romeo logo right here in the middle that has some nice texture to it. Again, makes it feel a little bit more quality, in my opinion. Now, moving further back, you do have a pretty small armrest, which you can slide back and forth like this, and you can also lift it up if you want to. You have a little bit of storage down there, as you can see, leather wrapped. Again, I want to have the green, some sort of contrast color for the stitching in here. Now, these seats, heated and ventilated, this is an option that you can get for the Tonale. I do like the design of this, and this is something that I would probably choose if I were to buy this car, have this option, because you have nice bolstering on these seats, and it also comes with the embroidered Alfa Romeo logo right here in the headrests, looking really nice in my opinion. Now, moving on to the steering wheel, and I really like the design of the steering wheel. I think it's a beautiful layout of everything, because we have very thin spokes right here on the sides. We have the start button right here, and very sporty and easy to reach when you're just grabbing the wheel like this. You have the controls here for the cruise control settings, and one thing I do every single time I get into this car, because when you restart the car, it's actually resetting the safety settings. That means that the lane keep assist is automatically on every single time you start the car. So I always turn that off by just clicking these two buttons right here. You can see active driving assist is now off. So I click the steering wheel button and then mode, and that turns everything off. Because I'm not gonna be on my phone when I'm driving this car, I can keep track of the lane myself, and I don't need to be, forcefully pushed into the lane. Some other buttons here on the right side of the spoke is you have the voice command, you have the volume buttons, and this button to configure whatever you want in the gauge cluster, with the beautiful logo in the middle, some silver trim right here, leather stitched, perforated leather where you're gonna keep your hands. And look at this, these are absolutely massive, these pedals in the back, and they are also metal, which is fantastic. In the entry-level Alfa Romeo, we have metal pedals that stick all the way down here. They have the correct size for exactly what I want in pedals that are mounted onto the column, because if you make turns like this, if you have your hand up here, you're making turns, you want them to be big so you don't have to remove your hand too much from the steering wheel to grab hold of the pedals. Although I do prefer pedals to be mounted onto the steering wheel itself, so I don't have to move my hands at all when I'm taking tight turns. But they have a nice click to them, as you can hear. A pretty big play in these pedals, and this is probably, we're going to talk more about that when we go for a drive, but I think the gearbox is probably the biggest letdown of this drivetrain. The 6-speed automatic is a little bit too slow. I would much rather have, as I said, an 8-speed dual clutch or something like that, that is a little bit quicker in the shifts. Looking up top, this is also an option for your Tonale to have a full sunroof up here. Again, a detail that, as you know, if you watched my reviews before, I would not care about, because I honestly do not care about sunroofs at all, and I personally never use them myself. And last but not least, we can't forget about this, a pretty decent size glove box. Now, with that said, I'm pretty comfortable here, and this is my driving position, so let's jump back in the rear seat and see if I can actually fit behind my own driving position in this entry-level small SUV. So let's open this up, first check out what it looks like. Again, it looks very clean, and it has this high quality feel to it, in my opinion. So let's jump in here and see the legroom behind myself. It is pretty tight, to be honest with you, as you can see, but keep in mind that I'm 6'1", and you can always ask the driver to just move forward a couple of inches, so you do have more legroom. But I would not sit like this if I was in the back seat. I would probably just sit like this, and if I do that, it's totally fine. Now looking at the center here, you do have the on and off switch for the vents. The vents themselves looking cute and small, and then you have two USB ports here, one USB-C and one USB normal. And as I showed you when we opened the trunk, you do have this that folds down, and boom, you have two cup holders back here. Now, of course, we're in an Alfa Romeo, and you know that the Alfas are all about two things, actually: the exterior design and the driving. So let's fire this up. Let's take it out on these mountain roads, and let's see what this drives like. First things first, we need to, of course, disable any sort of driving assistance. So turn all of that off. Active driving assist is now off. And let's start off in EV mode. So completely EV. Full EV, no internal combustion at all. I think this is about 120 horsepower or something like that. So the cool thing about this is now it works as a, you know, normal EV, but you only have 30 miles of range, which is totally fine to me. And then the gas pedal here, it has this, the last bit of travel in the gas pedal has this extra resistance to it. It's almost like a click. So if you go past that click, meaning if you completely floor the gas pedal, is going to engage the internal combustion engine, because that means that you're essentially requesting more power. And I think that's a really cool system. So having it in A is completely electric, so I'm going to put it into N, which is sort of the middle when needed. For example, if I floor it, the internal combustion engine comes alive, and it just works really well. I thought, as I said, this was going to be a weird driving experience to have this, you know, internal combustion, the engine itself just turn itself on and off all the time, and it would be like a, you know, a pretty jaggy or laggy driving experience. But it's not. It's actually really smooth. The handling is also really fun. It's a fun little SUV to drive, this Tonale, and I really appreciate what they have done with this. Not just the design, but also the driving capabilities of this thing. So let's go ahead and, of course, pop it in to D, which firms up the suspension, put it into manual mode. One thing that I wish was a little better in this car, the brakes are phenomenal as well. Of course, they are big Brembo brakes. Are also painted red, which means that they are more effective because they're red. But one thing that I would like to change here, or have improved, is the gearbox. I think the 6-speed transmission is a little slow in manual mode. I would like to have it be quicker, specifically on the upshifts. The downshifts are pretty well timed. They feel a little quicker than the upshifts. I'm not sure if that's actually the case, but the handling of this, man, it's a fun car to drive, even though it just has, you know, 285 horsepower, which is not a lot in today's standard. But then, of course, this is also the entry-level Alfa Romeo. Down to second, press it in the corners. it doesn't feel like a small SUV. It feels more like a hatchback to drive, which is of course a very good thing. And then you have the design. You know, the design, one of the best looking small SUVs out on the market today. And you have this fantastic interior, which I talked about why I love this interior so much, specifically the gauge cluster. I wasn't really sure if I prefer to have the paddles mounted to the column or the steering wheel itself. Now that I've driven a bunch of cars with different setups for the steering wheel, the paddles installation, I do think I actually prefer to have them be mounted on the steering wheel itself, for the simple reason that I don't have to move my hands when I'm shifting gears, because if I keep my hands here, they're always gonna be where my hands are. Now they're fixed on the column, which means it's in some tight corners I do have to move my hands to reach the pedal. So how do we sum up the 2024 Alfa Romeo Tonale Veloce? For me, I think it's a fantastic car in so many ways. The exterior design, which I absolutely love, as you know throughout this video. The interior design, which I think in this day and age, I love even more than the exterior, just because of the details that we talked about earlier, the gauge cluster, the physical buttons, the quality feel that we have in here. The driving experience with this transmission is the only thing to me that really lets it down, the 6-speed manual, 6-speed automatic. Other than that, it's a very fun and quick, sporty car to drive, and it feels, as I said earlier as well, more like a normal hatchback than it does a small SUV. So it all comes down to, I guess, the pricing, and then you have reliability, which I can't talk to in this video because I haven't had it for long enough. But for $58,000 for the Veloce, you can get the Tonale in its base trim for $47,000. And for $47,000, I think it's a really good deal, specifically with this drivetrain, with the exception for the transmission, which I wish was a quicker 8-speed automatic, for example. And the reliability, Alfa Romeo, as we know, had some reliability issues in the past. I'm not sure how this is going to hold up in the future, but overall, for the driving experience in this type of package and the design with this verde exterior color, I think I'm driving around here and doing everybody a favor, because they get to see this car from the outside, and that is, of course, a very good thing.